From the campus of Southern Utah University in Cedar City, the Utah Debate Commission welcomes you to the Attorney General Candidates Debate.
Good evening. I'm Maura Carabello, moderator for this evening. Welcome. On behalf of the Utah Debate Commission, we're pleased to come tonight from Southern Utah University's Sterling Church Auditorium. Tonight, we're hearing from the 4 candidates who have met the qualifications for this debate. The candidates are Rudy Bautista, Derek Brown, Andrew McCullough, and Michelle Quist. These 4 attorneys on this stage make us look forward to a lively but civil debate, with the goal of giving Utah voters firsthand exposure to good candidates and information for decision-making. A random drawing held prior to the debate determined that candidate Quist will get the initial response to the first question. Then we'll alternate turns on the remaining questions throughout the debate. So let's begin. Why do you want this job? And why are you the most qualified person to be Utah's next Attorney General? Ms. Quist, the floor is yours.
When I was a little girl, I would sit at the floor of my grandfather's chair and look up at his service revolver and medals that hung on the wall. I would ask him questions about his service. He was in the FBI under Hoover in Vegas when the mob started. We would ask him to tell us stories, but he wouldn't tell us any. He wouldn't sensationalize or politicize his service because politics do not belong in law enforcement. That is why I am running for Utah Attorney General. The Utah Attorney General's office has been politicized for far too long. Corruption, scandals, and self-dealing. It has become something it never should have been, up for sale. And some on this stage want to keep it that way, but I don't. I want to reform the office. I want an Attorney General with an independent voice to return integrity to the office. I'm Michelle Quist, and I hope to earn your vote.
Thank you. Same question for Mr. Bautista.
Good evening. My name is Rudy Bautista. I've been a defense attorney here in the state of Utah for 25 years. Prior to that, I served as an officer in the United States Navy and also in the Merchant Marine. I'm running for Attorney General because I've had enough, just like most of us, of politics, of politicians, and as the good old boy system. We need someone in the Attorney General's office who understands that the job is one thing only, and that is to protect and serve the people of the state, not the legislature, not the governor, not any corporations or special interest groups. I am the only candidate that has refused to accept any financial contributions. I'm doing that to ensure that we have no position whatsoever that the Attorney General can be beholden to any donor and want to make sure that the office is run with integrity and honor. I've dedicated my entire life to serving this country, and I continue and wish to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
Thank you. Thank you, Maura, for hosting, to the Debate Commission and to the students and faculty at SUU. We appreciate you letting us be here. I've spent the better part of this year traveling all over the state. My wife and I have had probably thousands of conversations with people about this specific role, which you've heard so much about. And there are 3 themes that emerge in all of those conversations. People want someone who will protect the most vulnerable, including children, who will protect the state from issues like federal government overreach, and will protect the state on issues involving crime and some of the things that we have seen. My background is not only in law firms and working with judges, but I also have experience working in the political arena because fundamentally this is a position that involves politics. But more important than that, it's a position that involves leadership, setting a vision and a direction for what is the largest law firm in the state of Utah. I've earned the trust and respect of many and hope to earn yours as well.
And
thank you.
Mr. McCullough.
Next month, it'll be 51 years that I've been practicing law in the state of Utah. So, and I say that because you have to retire at age 75 if you're a judge. I'm 76, and so I have more legal experience than any judge in the state of Utah. And I'm pretty pleased with myself on that, actually, and I tell the judges sometimes when they disagree with me. What I see the Attorney General's office needing to do is, I keep thinking about what George Bush I said about a kinder, gentler government. And I would like to see the government of the state of Utah be kinder and gentler to its citizens. I would like law enforcement to understand not that the Bill of Rights is something to avoid, to get over, get around, but to cherish. And I want to see the individual rights supported, and that's why I want to be Attorney General.
Thank you for your openings. It's a widely held perception in Utah that general elections are foregone conclusions. So why debate? How do you change that perception? I'll start with Mr. Bautista.
We change that by educating the public and giving them an opportunity to get to know all of us. The more public participation we have, such as this debate, the better it is to educate the public. I have been advocating that the Attorney General position should be free from any campaign donations and should be open to equal airtime and public access so that the public knows that we are only here to serve the people and not, as I've said before, corporations and other organizations. I'm actually an independent running under the Democratic Party ticket, but as an independent, I am both progressive and conservative depending on the issue. But I understand most importantly is that I must separate that. As Attorney General, I represent the people, and I must do what they mandate. And I want that message to be sent. As attorneys, we do what the people want, and only the people. And I'm personally tired of seeing the legislature overacting and doing things that are not what the constituents want.
Mr. Brown, same question to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And elections, of course, are not foregone conclusions, which is why it's so important that everyone, regardless of your political party, gets out and votes. This is a critical thing. One of the things I've been doing to make sure that that isn't the case is spending the time really going around. I think we have probably visited all but 1 or 2 counties in the state of Utah, talking about what it is the Attorney General does. Because probably the most common question I get, believe it or not, from people is, what does the Attorney General do? What is the role? And so I think one of the best things we can do as candidates is educate them on the role of the Attorney General, how it impacts the state, and how you can work with individuals in law enforcement, for instance. I've spent a lot of time working with and talking with sheriffs, with county attorneys, those individuals who are on the front lines. And that's what it is that we need to do as a state, because the Attorney General's office, as I mentioned, is effectively the largest law firm in the state of Utah, and it's important that people understand what that person does.
The same question of perception to Mr. McCullough.
First of all, I want to thank the Debate Commission for inviting a Libertarian and a United Utah Party candidate. We don't generally get invited to these things. And it is very exciting to be here, because you ask, it's a foregone conclusion, why do you do it? Because we have something to say. We have ideas. We have things we want to get across to the people, and it is very hard for a Libertarian or another third-party candidate to get those ideas out. And I am so pleased and so excited that we're here today to do that. I was thinking of Socialist Party candidate for president, ran 5 times in the early 1900s, and they said to him, "You keep running 5 times. You're not going to win. Why do you do it?" He said, "To get my ideas out there." He says, the Socialist Party has ideas on this and that. He claimed one of them was the 40-hour week.
Thank you. And finally, Ms. Quist.
The benefits of a debate is to share ideas. And from this debate, we can learn what the difference of the candidates are. For instance, we learned from Mr. Bautista that he isn't taking political contributions. We should also know that he isn't following the contribution laws, the financial disclosure laws. We learned from Mr. Brown that this is a leadership position, but we need to remember that it's a leadership position of a law firm, and that legal experience actually matters, and I have that legal experience. From this debate, I hope you take from my comments the benefits of an independent Attorney General, and that's what my comments will bring today. An independent Attorney General in the Attorney General's office will be able to break the partisan ties that have led to corruption and scandals that we have had for decades, because my hands won't be tied like we have had before.
We'll move on now to defining your approach to this office and the role. And Mr. Brown, you actually foreshadowed this for us, and we start with you on this question. It is, what is the proper role of the Attorney General in state government? Is this office a check on the governor and the legislature, or should they be working in tandem with those branches?
Thank you. That's a great question, because my fundamental philosophy of government is that the genius of our system is that we have power not given to the right person, but diffused among many people, not just within the branches, but within the actual branches themselves. In the executive branch, we have a check on the governor and the other branches, which is the Attorney General. The Attorney General is independent, and that's the way that it should be. I fundamentally view the Attorney General as responsible to the people who elect that person. There are 43 states like us. Some states actually appoint the Attorney General. That's not something that I would support, because I think fundamentally you are accountable to the people that put you in that position. And if the voters are the ones that elect the Attorney General is accountable to the voters. And I'm the only one here who's actually served in public office, and I've done this. And you've seen my track record of being accountable, and that's what I believe the role of Attorney General is.
Same question on the role to Mr. McCullough.
The Attorney General is independently elected in Utah, and I'm here to be heard on my ideas. If I should, by some miracle, get elected, I'm not going to be beholden to somebody who disagrees with me. I think that the Attorney General can do a lot of things with his bully pulpit. I think he can go to the legislature and he can say, this law that you're about to pass is dumb. He can also say that it's unconstitutional. He can also say that it's too expensive. He can also say a lot of other things to try and talk them out of it. And then if it has to be defended, he can certainly use his bully pulpit again to explain to the courts what is necessary. And I don't think he has to do exactly what the governor tells him to do, and he certainly doesn't have to do what the legislature tells him to do. He needs to make his noise, and I intend to make noise.
Ms. Quist, what would her role as Attorney General be?
The Attorney General is one of the 5 elected executive officers, constitutional officers in Utah. And as such, she should represent the people of Utah. And we have not had that in decades. We have not had an Attorney General speaking to the people of Utah, explaining what the legislature is doing. We saw that with Amendment D. We saw legislature put a proposed amendment on the ballot that was confusing and actually deceptive to the people. And we had a silent Attorney General say nothing, absolutely nothing. We need a nonpartisan, independent Attorney General who is willing to speak up and say to the people of Utah, this is what the legislature is doing, this is how it will affect your rights, so that the people can then engage with the legislature. We don't have that because we don't have an independent Attorney General. That's what we need.
And finally, Mr. Bautista.
The role of the attorney is to do all of the above. When laws are passed that are constitutional, the role of the Attorney General is to defend them. The role of the Attorney General is to work with the politicians to make sure that the laws are drafted properly and are following the will and dictates of the people. But the role of the Attorney General is also to keep them in check. Unfortunately, time after time, laws are passed that are unconstitutional, and they deprive us of our constitutional rights, both federal and state ones. And the Attorney General has been nothing but a puppet for the last 3 administrations, wasting our taxpayers' money litigating cases that should never have been litigated. Outside counsels should never have been hired. This has all been a waste. And as Attorney General, their role is to protect the citizens, and it's also to protect the pocketbooks of the citizens and to bring an end to frivolous lawsuits.
Thank you. Whitney, you would have time.
I wanted to point out the campaign laws that I was accused of not following. I've reported $0 received and spent, except for one time I was 2 days late when they didn't give me a notice, and I spent $100 paying a fine out of my own money. That is the only thing I've done.
Can I have a rebuttal?
Certainly.
We all paid a filing fee of over $900, and we all needed a contribution to pay that fee. Mr. Bautista didn't disclose any of those.
Any need by Mr. Brown and Mr. McCullough to weigh in? Okay.
I'll tell you, I didn't disclose it either because the party paid my fee. And I don't know how Mr. Bautista did it, but the party declared it. So you don't have to do it twice.
All right, thank you. Whitney Dyring is a student from Southern Utah University, and she has your next question.
Good evening. Given the scandals involving the last 3 Utah Attorney Generals, how specifically would you restore trust in the office and integrity?
Mr. McCullough, you'll start the answers for this.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to be a member of the Republican Attorney Generals Association and get together and do all this political stuff that's been going on. They do all kinds of national, and it's they get their instructions from out of the state. I don't intend to do any of that. I don't intend to run for re-election. I'm 76 years old. I don't intend to grandstand. I don't intend to build myself up. I don't intend to run for Senate afterwards. I just intend to do my business, and I know what my business is. I believe that my business is to get that kinder, gentler government and to get the government off of people's backs. And I know what to do, and it seems pretty simple and easy to me.
Same question for Ms. Quist.
Thank you for your question. This is why I'm running for Attorney General. We need an Attorney General who takes ethics with the utmost seriousness and avoids even the appearance of a conflict of interest. My opponent, Mr. Brown, has taken donations from conflicted parties, $50,000 from property developers with current projects, $10,000 from D.C. lawyers who want work from the office, $50,000 from dark money, national organizations. He's also represented Meta. The state has a current case against Meta. Legal ethics do not allow attorneys to file cases against former clients. These are clear conflicts of interest. We need an attorney general who does not have conflicts of interest, and only an independent attorney general can do that.
Mr. Brown, I'll let you answer when it's your turn, if that's okay.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Mr. Bautista.
The American Tort Reform Association sent out an email to all the candidates running for Attorney General and asked us to take a survey on making a pledge and a promise to be transparent. They made a public announcement on August 8th. I am the only candidate that made that pledge. That is available on the internet for all public to see. I have committed to be honest and forthright. And one of the things that it will ensure is that all access is public. We are public servants. Our calendars will be public. All legislature calendars should be public. The legislature passed a law making it private. I would argue that's not constitutional. The reality of it is we must be transparent so we can have the faith of the public. Since I have 25 years of in-court experience, I believe the Attorney General should run and show from examples and be in court themselves, and that's what I plan to do. And I also plan to make my income taxes public so people can see I'm not receiving any kickbacks whatsoever.
Finally, Mr. Brown, same question.
Thank you, and thank you, Whitney, for that question. Transparency is a critical piece of what it is that we do. As an elected official, I made it clear that I supported transparency and even sponsored bills to increase transparency and specifically getting information from the government through non-judicial means. I think it's critical that the Attorney General's office has this, because the way you create trust is by creating transparency, doing your job. And when people know what you're doing, when you're disclosing what you're doing, people will trust you, they'll understand what you're doing, and that kind of transparency will be critical in terms of what it is that we're doing. My belief is that transparency is something that every office should aspire to. We have disclosure laws that are very robust here in Utah, which is why I've disclosed any one of the donations that I've received. And the legal conflicts that were referenced earlier, I mean, this is, again, kind of a non-starter because law firms deal with this issue all the time. This is not, this is not problematic.
I'm going to stay on the public trust question as a follow-up, so I'm going to keep the same order, and I'm going to ask that your answers are in the 30-second mark this time. Is it appropriate for the Attorney General to join cases with other states, even if the cases may not impact Utah specifically? As Attorney General, how would you decide which cases to join? I believe
Is it me?
We started with Mr. McCullough.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think if there's a national issue that the state of Utah wants to weigh in on, that they should do so. The concern I have right now is that probably in the last few years, the Republican Attorneys General Association that helps keep our Attorney General in office pays him great quantities of money, and he then files brief after brief after brief. And it'll say in the newspaper every time, all Republican attorneys general signed this. No more.
Same question, 30 seconds, Ms. Quist.
If a case does not injure Utah taxpayers or Utahns at all, then filing cases in other states is a waste of taxpayer money. I will not continue that practice. We have enough issues at home. We have county prosecutors that can't fund drug cases because we are wasting tens of millions of dollars on cases that go nowhere.
Thank you. Involvement of other states, Mr. Bautista, goes to you.
My answer is it depends on the issue. One of the roles of the Attorney General is to protect the citizens and their interests, but it's also to see in the future and determine an issue might not be ripe and be prudent to follow today, but it may be tomorrow. And if we don't have a say in it today, we waive our right to contest it tomorrow. And so depending on the issue and what the public decides, yes, the Utah Attorney General should get involved in lawsuits if it has an effect on the state, and only if it has an effect or a foreseeable one.
And finally.
Thank you, and I agree with Mr. Bautista. It is entirely appropriate. In fact, you would expect and hope that the Attorney General for the state of Utah would have an ongoing relationship with AGs in other states, both Democrat and Republican, because if there are issues that impact us as a state, even those that are not necessarily political or partisan, I think it's entirely appropriate for us as a state, if we are affected, to work with those other states and join in, because there is power in a larger number of plaintiffs in a case, as every attorney knows.
Thank you. Let's move to the hot topic of public lands. We're back to a minute, and Ms. Quist, I'll start with you. Utah has a long history of dispute with the federal government over public lands. What defines a successful partnership between Utah and the federal government on federal land policies? Would your main focus be negotiations or lawsuits?
Negotiations are important. Sometimes lawsuits also work. I have actual experience in this area, which will bring judgment to the office. I am a single mother of 7. We don't take fancy vacations. We go camping, and we go on Utah's public lands. Down in southern Utah, our monuments and our national parks invite hundreds of thousands of guests. Sometimes our roads get wear and tear, and our federal government and our state government fight over who owns those roads. Sometimes the weather comes and it causes extreme weather, and our counties have to go and rescue people. And if the roads aren't properly maintained, then our counties can't go and rescue. These are the types of cases that are important to prosecute. I have that type of experience and judgment to know when our resources should be used to prosecute cases. That is what an independent attorney general can bring to the office.
Mr. Bautista, same question, public lands.
We need to remember we're one state in the United States of America. We need to stop this decisiveness of trying to argue this is our land and their land and all that nonsense, because it's all just political speech, rhetoric to get people excited. The reality of it is the federal lands are there for us to access. Our sheep and cattle ranchers have access to it. We all have access to recreational. I get to go mountain biking on federal land. I get to go skiing on federal land. I even get to go shoot my rifles on BLM land. We're not being denied access to it. This is all rhetoric to get the state to take over the land so that we can sell them for corporate greed.
Mr. Brown, same
Thank
question.
you. And just to kind of riff off of that, we are actually being denied access. And that's the reason this is so important. I've spent countless hours negotiating and working with county commissioners and people who are directly impacted by this issue. You mentioned, is it lawsuits or is it negotiations? The answer is, in reality, it's both. It has to be both. We as a state have over 60 current lawsuits on this issue that we're working with. But when you have a state where roughly 2/3 of the entire state is controlled by the federal government, you have places like my wife and I were with my father-in-law in Garfield County recently. 93% of Garfield County is owned and controlled by the federal government. And so this is an issue we've been working on for over a decade as a state. The recent lawsuit that was filed by the legislature, by the Attorney General, by the governor is something that I absolutely support, because it is critical that as a state we have the ability to control it and not individuals who are unaccountable 1,800 miles away.
Thank you. And final answer to you, Mr. McCullough.
And I would really like to be able to look at all of you people tonight and say I have exactly the right answer to this question. And this is one that has come up recently, especially with the new lawsuit. And I've looked at it carefully, and I'm still looking at it carefully. My general impression is that when the state comes in and says that we want more of the land under our control, it's a money grab. We want to be able to use it to generate money, and I'm really concerned about that. The federal government uses resources that the state simply doesn't have to take care of immense areas of land that needs to be taken care of. It's not commercially viable. It's not stuff that you can make money on. And I worry very much that the state, if they win this, could shoot themselves in the foot. But I want to look at it more carefully, and I could change my mind, honestly, at least in part.
Thank you. The next question for you will come from Southern Utah University student Kelty Luttrell.
Good evening. In the previous Utah legislative session, there were a few controversial bills that were passed, one of which was House Bill 261, Equal Opportunity Initiatives. The diversity clubs impacted by this have expressed much disagreement and opposition to this bill. What will you do to address the concerns of the students impacted by this bill? And do you believe that it is potentially violating the basic rights as outlined in the Constitution?
We will begin with Mr. Bautista.
Absolutely they do. We have laws already in place to protect our privacy and to protect us all. Laws are continually being passed on moral judgment, and those judgments are based on stereotypes and hate. We do not need laws to make life more difficult. We need laws that allow us to fundamentally follow the constitutional rights that we have, to live our lives free and to be able to pursue the pursuit of happiness. And these laws will not be defended if I am elected Attorney General. I'm tired of seeing, once again, as I mentioned, the legislature and governor passing laws that are not the will of the people, but special interest groups. And that needs to be put an end to. And Attorney General, as I said, defend constitutional laws and not support those that are unconstitutional.
Mr. Brown, your time.
Thank you, and Kelty, I appreciate that. That also goes to the role of the Attorney General. It's twofold. When I was a attorney in private practice working with clients, I wouldn't just help them after they had things where they got in trouble. I would help them in advance. And so on the issue of, do you defend a law like the one that you're referring to, even if you think it's unconstitutional, what you do as Attorney General is you work with them in advance. You work with the legislature. I've worked with them. I've served with them. I understand how they think. But you express the legal issues, help them see around corners with the potential problems of the bill that you've mentioned. I think you've identified that there are some concerns from a privacy standpoint. But after you do that, the Attorney General is the one who defends laws and defends the lawsuit. And so there's a lot of the real hot-button issues, and we've seen these in housing and employment and some of the other privacy and diversity kind of things that you mentioned. And I have a track record of doing this very thing as a member of the House.
Kelty's question now to you, Mr. McCullough.
Everybody knows that libertarians are independent thinkers. I often say that when the National Party gets together for a committee meeting, that it's amazing if they don't start a fist fight. And so as a libertarian, I don't see everything in one color, in one direction. People need to have the opportunity to be different themselves and to be free. And that's terribly important to me. And I have watched the legislature, and I really had great hopes for our governor when I thought that he would understand individual people and understand their needs and understand their differences and encourage all that. And I have been terribly disappointed in it over the last while. And I will work, if I get a chance, to write this again. And it's very important to me that we have our rights to be different, because, by golly, I'm different.
The Attorney General should enforce laws, but protect individual rights. And sometimes with a partisan Attorney General, they forget that they're supposed to protect individual rights. We have seen headlines across this state about sexual harassment on our college campuses, about religious discrimination that minorities have been ridiculed, about racial discrimination at our high schools and our junior highs that are causing our children to harm themselves. And our Attorney General has been silent. That is wrong. We need an Attorney General in this position who is willing to speak up. And we haven't had that for decades, because our partisan Attorney General has been too busy off filing partisan lawsuits that waste taxpayer money. It's time to bring someone in who's willing to speak up for our individual liberties and not partisan interests.
I want to move now to some issues of polarization. Recently, there has been some controversy around ballot initiatives and the power balance between representational government, which is our legislature, and direct-to-people lawmaking, the initiative process. Is it important to maintain unfettered, non-repealing citizens' initiative rights? This question starts with you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you. I appreciate that. One of the hallmarks, we talked earlier about the hallmarks of our system of government, and that is that you have an AG that is separate and apart from the government, or the governor rather, and they act as a check and balance. Another check and balance that we have is that direct initiative process that we have, where people can pass laws and then the elected officials can amend, alter, repeal, and change those laws. We've seen it go both ways, where people have passed something, the legislature's amended it, and vice versa. For over a century, we've had this system of checks and balances in place. I think it's healthy. I think it's essential. One of the concerns I had is a Supreme Court decision that said we're going to take it back. So I was very supportive of the legislature convening to specifically give the people of Utah the ability to decide if they wanted to reinstate that. And there were a lot of people really concerned about giving you, the voters in Utah, the right to make that decision. I had no concerns with that. I still don't.
Thank you. This Citizens Initiative question to you, Mr. McCullough.
I was on the committee that ran the civil forfeiture initiative several years ago, and I was on the committee that ran the marijuana initiative recently, and we won both of those, and it was terribly important. Civil forfeiture, government taking of property, is just a terrible idea, and the idea of ruining lives over marijuana when we're surrounded by legal states is a terrible idea. The legislature came in and whitewashed our efforts in both cases, and I was frustrated about it. But this particular time, the one that's recently, the Supreme Court says, look, you went too far this time. This particular initiative was to change the form of the government, and that's more important than the marijuana thing or the civil forfeiture, and you can't undo that. And I think that was a brilliant decision. I read it carefully.
Thank you. Ms. Quist, same question.
What Mr. Brown just said is completely wrong. For over a century, Utahns have had the right to use the initiative process to reform government without government infringement. For over a century. That means that the legislature cannot come in and repeal or amend. That is what the Supreme Court held. The legislature did not like that, and they put an amendment on the ballot, and they deceivingly wrote a ballot language that didn't explain to the voters what they were voting on. That was deceptive. And they didn't even follow the Constitution that required them to publish it for 2 months before. For any attorney in this state, much less on this stage, to support that is ludicrous. That's all I have to say.
And finally, Mr. Bautista.
We seem to all forget that as a republic, a democracy, we are accountable to the people, and the people only. Absolutely, citizens have the right to change the law and to enact the laws. And many of our key issues, abortion rights, for example, should be left to the public in a whole, not the representatives who many times go against their own constituents. We forget that legislatures sometimes they barter. Hey, vote for this and I'll vote for that. It's a game. And when we are dealing with rights of people and the wishes of people, the buck stops there. The voters should have the final say, and that is the law. That is what many people have sacrificed, whether it was to get the right to vote, whether it was for civil rights, or whether it was defending this country in wars. Too many have sacrificed to let it go.
Today's headlines were dominated by missile attacks being led by political polarization that we've watched play out during this year. So I want to ask about political polarization and the impacts on the state of Utah. Utah voters have listed political discord as one of the top concerns in this year's election. As an independent statewide office holder, what would be your strategy to decrease harmful political discourse? We start with you, Mr. McCullough.
Well, I'm a political junkie, and I certainly have strong opinions. And I read the newspapers, and I watch the news, and I get frustrated, and I want to throw things. But what's really important here is that the process, the democracy process, is preserved. We need to be able to be in a position where after the election we can get together and we can continue to work together. And it has, I worked in Congress, was just a summer internship many years ago. And I noticed that that Democratic members of Congress and Republican members of Congress would eat lunch together and joke and have fun and socialize. They don't do that anymore. They will pass each other in the halls and not say hello, and that's terribly frustrating. It needs to stop.
Ms. Quist.
I appreciate this question. Decreasing political discourse is actually why I'm running for Attorney General. I am worried that our Attorney General's office has become too political over the past few decades. I want an independent Attorney General's office to engage with the voters, to explain what the legislature is doing, to neutrally engage with voters, tell them how laws affect them, what might happen, pros and cons, so that voters can engage then with the legislature on their duties and obligations with the legislature. I don't want an Attorney General to bring politics into our law enforcement, because like I said at the beginning, politics do not belong in law enforcement. Our laws should be enforced evenly and fairly, and that's it. Politics don't belong.
Same question, Mr. Bautista.
My colleagues have all said things that I completely agree with. The realities of it is that Attorney General does need to be independent. And as I indicated when I started, I'm actually an independent. I'm a registered independent voter. I'm running under the Democratic ticket so that I can get the word out. But I do agree that politics have no role in protecting the citizens of the state. I have demonstrated that for 25 years, standing up and defending people to make sure that only the guilty are held accountable, and to make sure that our constitutional rights, which have all been broken and faded away and forgotten and destroyed by courts, are stopped. And as Attorney General, my intention is to protect all of us. As I indicated, I started that when I was a young boy in the 70s. I saw the Iran hostage crisis going on, and I was ashamed that it was going on, and it must be ended.
And the final answer goes to Mr. Brown.
Thank you. And I love this question because we do have a sickness in our country, and that is that we aren't able to speak to each other. And we see nasty personal attacks all the time. Now, when I was elected the chairman of the Republican Party, there was a lot of infighting. You saw a lot of headlines on it. The first thing I did at my first meeting with all 180 people was I gave them a book entitled Love Your Enemies by Arthur Brooks, one I recommend everyone read. And the idea of the book was you can't win over minds until you win over hearts and people know that you care. And ironically, one of my best friends during that time serving as chair was the Democrat Party chair, because we dealt with a lot of the same issues. But what we need to do is to model what that kind of civil dialogue, civil discourse looks like, because we see so much nastiness and partisanship and specifically attacks on individuals. My goal as Attorney General is to attack issues, which is why you're not going to see me attacking other people up here on the stage. You're going to see me talking about issues that matter to you, hopefully to model what civil dialogue actually looks like.
Social media is a hot topic. It's also interesting because it's an evolving topic. My question on social media. Utah has joined in several letters and lawsuits in an array of issues regarding social media. They range from media censorship concerns over social media's impact to social media's impact on mental health. As Attorney General, would you continue the course of action Utah is on, or what areas would you be focused on? We'll start with Quist, Ms. Quist. I had to double check.
I have experience litigating cases against social media companies, and the balancing act, of course, is protecting First Amendment rights of Utahns versus any harms that might come to our children on social media. Now, the cases that Utah has right now are currently under injunction because Utah hasn't yet figured out how to balance those First Amendment rights. And as Attorney General, that would be the first concern of my administration. I have kids at home, and social media obviously is a big concern. But as Attorney General, First Amendment is paramount, and everybody uses social media, and Utahns can't be affected by fear of new technologies. Social media is a responsibility of parents and not of government.
Social media question goes to you now, Mr. Bautista.
That's exactly what I was just about to say. Parents need to take responsibility to rear their children how they deem appropriate and to protect their children. When we have government intervention in freedom of speech, when we have government intervention in freedom of religion, we have tyranny. We have seen time after time that history has demonstrated that an ignorant public, a public left in the dark, a public controlled by hate, will only lead to tyranny and, unfortunately, many times to war. One of the problems we have in the Middle East is that the people there are undereducated and have no access to free speech. Parents must protect their children. That is their role. The government is to let the rest of us flourish.
Same question, Mr.
In regards to the lawsuits, I would have to look at each one individually and decide from there, but I'm inclined to not.
Thank you. Same question to you, Mr. Brown.
And I would be inclined to absolutely keep these lawsuits moving forward. I love this question because it's something that's very personal to me, not just because I have a teenage daughter who would really like a TikTok account. And I would encourage everyone to remove TikTok from your phones and not be on TikTok at all. I mean, it's very problematic. But even more important to that, we as a state are involved in several lawsuits. I have worked with and, in fact, represented Meta in these issues. I helped bring them to the table with the legislature to figure out how do we resolve these issues. We've got to get this one right. And as has been said, we've got to figure out the balancing because it's tricky. I've worked with academics. I've worked with attorneys, psychotherapists. I've worked with people trying to figure out how we get this right. And just a few weeks ago, a federal court here said we didn't. And we're now the 6th state who's had a preliminary injunction issued on this issue. And so I would continue this. It's a fight that we have to keep moving forward on. And it is incredible. Our kids are too important.
And to you, Mr. McCullough.
I'm sitting here kind of chuckling at the question. I get on Facebook probably pretty much every day, and I talk to my friends, and I learn a lot, and I communicate. I also see an awful lot of fighting and an awful lot of nasty stuff. And I don't have a problem with pushing that button that says I don't want to be friends anymore if they get angry and they get abusive. And to be, well, that's censorship. No, it's not. I don't have to listen. I don't have to get involved in stuff I don't want to. I'm the only one up here I know, probably the only one in this building who does not carry a smartphone. And therefore, my access to the whole idea of social media is a little bit less. But I use it when I can, and I enjoy it, and I'm certainly not going to censor it. But it needs to not. Frankly, I'd like to see a lot of parents throw their stuff in the toilet.
Can I have a rebuttal? Mr. Brown noted again that he represented Meta. That is a clear conflict of interest that I don't understand why he doesn't understand. If he had legal experience, he would know that a lawyer cannot sue a former client.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
The Attorney General's office deals with conflicts of interest all the time. There are almost 300 attorneys. The issue of conflicts and former clients is dealt with on a regular, routine basis. Ms. Quist should know that. She's just hoping that you don't know that.
May I respond?
I'll give you 10 seconds.
I do know that, but then he shouldn't trump up his experience because he can't use it.
If Mr. Brown wants to add anything.
You know what? I think enough has been said. I'd love more than 10 seconds, but
Terrific.
We'll go with that.
I'm going to quicken our pace a little bit. We're going to get down to shorter answers and try and get through a few more. So I'm going to ask that you stick to 20 to 30 seconds on this response. Give me your top 3 priorities on day 1 in office. I'll start with Mr. Bautista.
Making it transparent and open, and clearing all the rhetoric and getting rid of all the shame and embarrassment that office has created. Number 2, enforcing our laws to keep the state safe. I grew up, unfortunately, in East LA. And I say unfortunately because in the 70s, it was ridden by crime, gangs, and underemployment. And I saw what happens to a community when it's not kept safe. And I want to make sure that this state, where I've called home for 30 years, is safe.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you. An analysis of what you do when you come into an organization. This is what I've done before. You look at personnel, you look at the systems, you look at management, you look at efficiencies, and you look at outcomes. And I have an entire team of people I will be working with to do that and to make sure that the Attorney General's office not only is transparent, but that it is the most respected law firm in the state of Utah.
Mr. McCullough.
I want to look for opportunities to cut back on enforcement activities. For instance, I already mentioned marijuana. We are surrounded on 3 sides by legal states. The government tries really hard to keep marijuana out. They can't do it. We shouldn't be spending thousands and thousands of dollars doing it, and we shouldn't be hurting thousands and thousands of people. We should, the same thing, for instance, they come into people's homes and they take children out because somebody complained that the mom was abusive. We need to be much more careful about that.
Finally, Ms. Quist.
I will stop the lawsuit against the newspapers hiding the public calendars. I will reprioritize funds towards our county prosecutors for Utah's drug problem, and I will create a vision of transparency and integrity with our department leaders.
I'm going to ask for the next round to be a yes or no answer, and many of you have already addressed it, so I'm just looking for clarity. Will you make your calendar open to the public? Mr. Brown.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Mr. McCullough.
Yes.
Ms. Quist.
Yes.
Mr. Bautista. Thank you very much. So as we close, how would you manage the relationship with state and local law enforcement? Mr. McCullough, we'll begin with you.
Well, I have spent many, many years, of course, fighting with local law enforcement, although I get along with many of them very well. A very important law officer who used to fight with me all the time is now a client, which is amazing. I nearly fell over. Respect. I want them to understand where I'm coming from. I want them to understand that I respect them, but that we need to do some things differently.
Thank you.
Our local law enforcement puts their lives on the line every day, and they need our resources and our support. Oh, we have 3 seconds. I would support them with resources. They need more resources.
Mr. Bautista.
That's exactly what they need. There are people who are volunteered to serve and risk everything to protect us all, and we need more of them on the streets.
And for me, this isn't what I would do. This is what I have been doing, and that is meeting one-on-one with law enforcement all across the state of Utah to find out what it is that they need and how the Attorney General's office can best help them get those resources.
I'm going to give you one really hard yes, no. How relevant is your party affiliation? I'm going to ask, will your party affiliation lead your decisions? I'll start with Ms. Quist.
No.
Mr. Bautista.
Absolutely not. I've gotten nothing from them.
Mr. Brown. And Mr. McCullough.
My philosophy is a libertarian. I believe in freedom. Is that important to me? Absolutely, yes. I will use that philosophy.
Thank you for that, yes. We appreciate that. Okay, now we have reached the end of the debate and certainly the questions, which you've done very well to cover so many. A random drawing held earlier determined the first closing statement would go to Mr. Brown.
Great, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here and hopefully for the people of Utah to get to know us better. I am running for 4 reasons. Alex, Zach, Eliza, and Spencer. Those are my kids. And I ask myself regularly, I love this state. What kind of state are we going to leave to them? We are at a critical juncture here in Utah and nationally. And for those of you who are actually watching this debate, you're likely the kind of person who's informed. And you don't just know that, you feel it. And you know that what we do in the next few years will have a major impact on the kind of state that we give to our children. Is it safe? Is it effective? Is it prosperous? I have earned the respect and the trust of leaders like our former governor. And they have endorsed me. People like the former governor have endorsed me because they know that I'm someone that can do this as Attorney General. My hope is that I can earn your trust as well. Thank you.
And now, Mr. McCullough, your closing statement.
I want to reiterate my thanks to the commission to bring me into this. When you guys called me on the phone, I asked if it was a joke. Are you really calling a libertarian? Yes, we really are, and we really want to hear from you. Thank you so much that you have been listening to me. But what I want to continue to do is to preach freedom. I want to continue to preach the Bill of Rights. I want to continue to preach kinder, gentler government. I want to continue to preach less oppression. I want the state, if I were to spend 4 years doing this, I want people to say at the end of it, I feel more free than I did when Andy got in. He's really accomplished something, and he's helped me live my life the way I want to live it. If I can even do a tiny little bit in that respect, I will be the happiest man around.
Ms. Quist, your closing statement.
You need an attorney general who will represent you, not DC lawyers, not lobbyists, not political insiders. It doesn't even matter who the attorney general is running for the partisan office. We need an attorney general who is independent, not one who has a campaign funded by dark money, lobbyists, big tobacco, big oil, or other big companies or developers. With a history of our Attorney General's campaign, these type of donations concerns me. We need reform. I've given you examples of the type of Attorney General campaign, of a type of Attorney General government that we could have with independence. My name is Michelle Quist, and I hope to bring integrity, reform, and a new way of operating our Attorney General's office. And I ask for your vote.
And final closing statement, Mr. Bautista.
Actions speak louder than words. When I graduated college, we had a saying, and it was acta non verba, which was Latin, and it loosely translated to judge a person by their deeds, not their words. My entire life, whether going to a service academy, whether being commissioned as an officer in the Navy, whether going to law school and working as a public defender, and then going on to private practice and being a successful business owner, has all been dedicated to one thing: serving the rights and protecting us all, and I will continue to do so. Everything Andy said, I agree with wholeheartedly. I would like to bring the same thing to this state and bring a cloud of shame away from us. I believe, from what I've heard, all of us wish to do that, and I'm proud that we're all here doing such. But I ask the people, the voters, to judge us by our actions, and I've demonstrated an entire life of protecting and defending, and I will continue to do so as Attorney General.
Thank you, candidates, for participating in tonight and for your dedication to public service. Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. Contact your county clerk if you have any questions about making your vote count in this election. We greatly appreciate Southern Utah University for donating the Sterling Church Auditorium for this debate. We're also grateful for Larry H. and Gail Miller Family Foundation, Zions Bank, and the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation for their generous support of the Utah Debate Commission. This debate and others from previous years are available at utahdebatecommission.org. I'm Maura Carabello. Thank you and good night. Nice work. There we go.
Can we get a picture with you?
Of course.
Perfect.
Well done. Camera guys were on you, I noticed. Good stuff.
It was so good. Hey, Amelia, can you take a picture of us, please? I'd love to. Yes. I'm going to squeeze.
Good.
Bless you. And you fit in the middle.
You a second camera when you're
Okay.
behind my back.
Beautiful. Oh, I'll take it. Thank you. Hey, you have a nice camera. Where's the camera that was on you? Right there? I could not find it.
Really well done.
you've made a lot about the fact that you're here on stage. You've been on debates before, but
Yes.
do you see this as a trend where we have not one but two third-party candidates? This isn't the only debate where third-party candidates have met the polling threshold. So do you see this as a sign of things to come?
Yeah, I have been on debates before. The debate commission came up with these rules, and the rules didn't seem to work really well for a while. This year, they're working really well. This year, 3 libertarians out of 3 libertarians are on the debate stage, and I'm excited as I can be. I didn't really want to come down here today. It's a long trip, and I'm busy and all that sort of stuff. But it's terribly important that I get the opportunity to. And I have to say I've had more fun today than I've had in a while. And I'm so glad that I don't know whether they've modified the polling or modified the rules or whatever, but I am so glad that we have the opportunity to be heard. And I don't think 4 was too many.
What separates you from your fellow candidates here? I mean, if you're making a pitch to voters, what do you say to them why they should choose Andy McCullough versus anyone else on the stage?
Well, I tried to do that in the last hour, but the Reader's Digest version, as we old people used to say, is that I believe in a freer society. We didn't talk a lot, for instance, about abortion tonight, and we don't need to right this minute. But there's a tremendous divide between the people in our state and in all states, and the people of the states that have had an opportunity to vote on it have all voted to give rights, and so there's I never thought of myself as an abortion supporter, and I'm not. I'm just a supporter of freedom, and I'm a supporter of don't stick your nose into my private business. And there's so much that the government does. I get so many people coming in. I have one tomorrow where a girl got arrested for having a tiny little bit of marijuana in her bedroom. I mean, really. What I want is the government to stop harassing people and using their morals to tell other people what to do. I don't use marijuana, but if I got sick and I felt it would help me, you bet I would not let the government stop me.
You referenced this during the debate, but I want to press you on this a little bit.
Okay,
more.
sure.
Are you pushing for full decriminalization?
Absolutely. We're going to.
And to what extent do you mean?
Well.
Absolutely. I mean, what are you talking about? Are we talking about possession? Are we talking about distribution? Where's your limit?
If we're talking about marijuana as opposed to fentanyl, for instance, absolutely, I think it should be legal. It is legal in Nevada and in Colorado and in Arizona. You can walk across the border and you can smoke yourself silly. And I don't intend to smoke myself silly. But if I did feel it was necessary medically, for instance, I would try it. I have had so many people who have had their careers ruined. They can't get loans for school and so on and so forth for something so silly. There's no reason that I can imagine why marijuana should be illegal. And I'm a member of the Marijuana Policy Project and have been for 25 years. Is that everything?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for coming. And once again, thanks everybody for having us here. It has been a blast.
part to fixing any problem is admitting there's a problem. An independent attorney general will bring an awareness of the fact that there was a problem, and that breaking from the partisan ties will bring in independence and a promise to be transparent. I will stop the lawsuit about hiding public calendars. I will be transparent with executive financials and executive hiring, and just basically everything that's happening in the executive area of the Attorney General's office. And like I said in the debate, it's important that the department leaders have a leader that is present in the office. That will help them know that transparency is key, because they have had an absent leader, and so they don't think it's important. When they know that they have an attorney general who is present, and that ethics counts and that transparency counts, then they will finally understand that this is important, and it will make a difference.
There's a lot of debate. Obviously, you are here representing the United Utah Party.
Yeah.
You're on stage with the Libertarian against what traditionally debates are between the two major parties.
Absolutely.
What does it mean for you to be here on this stage? What do you hope to get from this?
It means that Utahns know that there's a problem. The fact that I got enough support to get onto the debate stage shows that Utahns recognize there's a problem and want a change in the office. They want reform. They know that reform is necessary, and they're not happy with the Republican Party, who has had stewardship over this office for 3 administrations. I mean, we have everybody up here saying they're an independent, except for the Republican who's saying he won't even be partisan. It doesn't make sense. Everybody's stepping away from who they are, except for me, who's saying I am independent because I am here to run this office differently.
You were previously in Republican Party leadership.
I was.
So what led to your break?
Well, besides the fact that they told me to leave because I am a moderate, I'm the same person, but the Republican Party became something that I didn't recognize anymore. Trump isn't my leader. He never was my leader. He told people who didn't follow him to leave the party, and so I left. But more important than that, the United Utah Party stands for principles of ethical government and transparency. And that is the perfect host for a government office that has lacked both of those things for 3 administrations.
You're not the only third-party candidate that will appear in a debate this election cycle. Do you see that as a trend, or do you see that as an aberration?
No, it is a trend. Utahns don't trust government. We've seen that in polling, but also nationally, independents are the most, the largest voting bloc. It's over 50% now. And in Utah, unaffiliated voters are the 2nd largest voting bloc, and I think that's only because Republicans keep their primary closed.
Going forward, the Attorney General's office, if you were elected, I mean, it's an office that has a reputation for high turnover. How would you fight that?
Well, they have a reputation for high turnover because they have no leadership. Their leader's been absent. Their leader has not been somebody to look up to, and because their salaries are low. So recently their salaries were increased, but still not up to market rate. We need more funding, and we need leadership, and that's what I'm promising. Every job needs a leader to look up to as number one. Every job also needs a salary to keep them there, and every job needs job satisfaction. And that is what a leader is able to provide. So that's what I would, make sure that I would start to work with my employees on day one.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Nice to be here.
So the 900 plus change to file, that came out of my own pocket. Wasn't aware that it was going to be $900. I paid that myself. I have not been reimbursed by anyone. That came out of my own pocket. Then we had, when I ran in 2020, we would get emails telling us when we had to report things. We didn't get one at the first rotation, and so there was, I didn't realize it until 2 days later, and then I reported that I have 0 campaign contributions. I was fined $100, so I put down on the documents that $100 fine was paid by me to reimburse myself for the fine of not reporting that I received 0 contributions. So I have not received any money, nor have I asked for any money from any one person, group, or anything. I've had people offer, and I've told them time after time, that this state's top prosecutor should not be accepting financial contributions from anyone. It just breeds corruption. And we need to make that office clean. And we need to be, as I've advocated time after time, equal airtime.
You not taking campaign contributions, does that mean you're not campaigning?
No, I'm campaigning. I have made every public speech that I've been invited to. I have been advocating. I have a web page up, which I just realized I need to report that I paid for myself. I think it was $19. Needless to say, and it was made by her at no cost. But the point I'm trying to make is that we need to clean up this office, and the best way to do that is to make sure we're not beholden to any group.
So you said repeatedly in the debate that you are an independent and not necessarily aligned with the Democratic Party. Why did you go for the Democratic nominee if you don't support the Democratic Party's maybe platform or principles?
As I indicated, I am independent. I have conservative views and I have progressive views. I am a firm supporter and believer of unions. That is a Democratic principle. I believe the workers of this country has made this country great, and they need to be supported. And sometimes corporate greed needs to be put in check. There are lots of corporations that do honorable work. There's lots of small businesses that take care of their employees. But this country was founded by employees, so that's one topic that I totally agree with the Democratic Party. The other thing is we need to have equality. We also must maintain and ensure that a woman has the right to dictate the course of her own life. And so that is another policy that I believe that should be left to the public, but I support the Democratic principles that a woman should have the right to choose.
Keeping on the idea of the independents here, what we saw tonight was rather unique in that we have not just the 2 major party candidates, but also third parties. What do you make of that, and is that a sign of things to come?
That is a great thing for this nation and for this state. The more opportunity we have to get to know who are running to represent us, the better it is for all of us. This was the democratic process and needs to be encouraged. Unfortunately, there is another candidate who's running as well as a full independent, and he was not allowed to participate. I believe he should have been. Back in 2020, I ran, again, as an independent on the Libertarian ticket. Mainly, at that time, I wanted to debate Sean Reyes. I wanted to point out all the corruption that was going on in his office and all the rhetoric that he was talking about. Unfortunately, he dodged every opportunity to engage in that, and I wasn't allowed to participate in the debate. So Ms. Quist, when she was registering when I was, and I told her that if I had any say, I would ensure that all participants were part of this. And I'm so glad that they expanded and included them. Okay.
Thanks, Rudy.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
You would explain how you would handle the social media case that the state has against social media, specifically Meta, given that you have a conflict. And I know you said that there are protocols.
Yeah.
That there are
So you just follow the protocols.
But would that mean then that you're taking the state's top lawyers taking a back seat in such an important case?
Well, I think what you do as a state is I've talked to ethics professionals who have made it very clear there's no such thing really as the conflicts itself in this arena are ones that the office deals with all the time. They're always hiring people, and people are leaving. And so there's just a protocol for how you deal with this. And, I would work to the extent that it needs to be handled by others. That's certainly something that could be the case. But this is a common process that the office deals with on a regular basis. So.
But it's very rare to have the Attorney General you're elected personally impacted by this more than just other conflicts. So what do you envision those guardrails looking like, at least as you would set policy?
Well, I think one of the things from a policy standpoint, I have been working with a group of attorneys, and I will have an ethics committee specifically in place. And some of these include past presidents of the bar, individuals who are well known in the legal community, to vet each of these issues to make sure that we aren't running afoul of any issues from a conflict standpoint, and really just set up guardrails, because that's ultimately what I think that we need to do as an office, is we need transparency. And the way you create trust is by starting with transparency. And if you're transparent and people know what you're doing and they know where you are, trust is just an inevitable outgrowth of that process.
Respond to the allegation that you accept dark money.
Well, I don't know what she's referring to in that, but I have a lot of donations from people that I know, friends, family, groups. Probably is referring to the Republican groups, which they support me. And I have no problem with the support from Republicans nationally, who are hoping that in this open Republican election, or open election for Attorney General in Utah, that we will have a conservative Attorney General.
One of the big criticisms, and you certainly saw it being lobbed at your direction by all sides here tonight, was issues with attorneys generals, the predecessors. What would you do? What do you make of their administrations, and what would you do differently? If everybody's attacking them, saying these Republican attorneys general were mired in controversy.
Well, I think the way that you address that is what I've done when I was a legislator, is you create a system where there's transparency and then accountability. And I think trust inevitably follows when you do both of those things. That includes things like the calendar. I've been asked, will I release my calendar? The answer is yes. When people feel like you're hiding something, I think it has a way of decreasing trust. When they know what's going on, when you open them up, when you get people involved. So it's not just an issue of going about doing what the Attorney General does. It's an issue of enrolling people, getting them involved in the mission of the office. And when you do that and you create a transparent system where people know if you're doing what you said you'll be doing, then trust is just an inevitable outgrowth of that process.
You touched on this a little bit, in that you were starting to hedge off into Republican national money.
Yeah.
Do you know where the Republican Attorney General's national money comes from funding?
I don't know a lot of the sources. I know that some of them are disclosed, but that's not a group that, I'm not in a position as a candidate to know kind of where that is at this point.
Like you said, you would happily take it from the
Well, and I've said that I'll take donations from, if people support me, if they think that I'll do a good job, I will absolutely take the donation, but it is never transactional. It never means there's any quid pro quo. And this is what I said when I was a legislator, is people would donate to me, and I would often sort of jokingly say, I am likely to disappoint you. And they would say, what do you mean by that? I'd say, well, because this is not a transaction. I'm likely to vote against your interest, and you have to know that that's fundamentally who I am, is I'm someone who's going to act consistent with my moral principles. And regardless of where donations align, I have to act that way, and I will.
This was an unusual event in that typically it's the two major parties
Right.
debating on the stage. You had third parties, not one, but two. So what do you make of that? And I guess as the former chair of the Republican Party, is this a chilling moment of things to come?
No, not at all. I've done my own internal polling, and the poll that the debate commission did was wildly out of whack with the internal polling and the other of mine and other candidates that I've seen. And so to have their polling done the way it was, and then to add a margin of error on top of it, that's the reason that we had 4 people here instead of 2. Now, that being said, I'm more than happy to debate anyone, and I have been since day one. So I welcome the additional participation. I mean, part of me wishes they would have just invited all 5 of the candidates here. That would have made it even more interesting. But no, to answer your question on whether this is an omen of things to come, I do not believe it is. And the polling that I've seen doesn't show that's the case.
So you don't see this as a trend emerging?
No.
More people maybe turning to the third?
No, I don't. Good?
Thanks, sir.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.